All right. Hey, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, we are back taking a look at the tropics. Today is Sunday, September 5th, 2021. This is your evening tropical update. Well, we continue to track Hurricane Larry, still a large, powerful hurricane in the central Atlantic basin, but behaving as expected. Larry has been taking its turn to the north we expected through the weekend, and right now still looking like it's on track to move up very close to Bermuda later this week, but then eventually recurve off the eastern seaboard and should be no threat to the eastern United States. We're going to talk about Larry for a couple minutes, and then we're going to change our focus to Invest 91L, this little festering area of low pressure that's now moving into the Gulf of Mexico. Some slight tropical development possible later this week, but we're not expecting anything major. So we'll talk about that, and then we'll look beyond this week into what the tropics may hold as we go into the middle of September. So, Larry, 5 p.m. National Hurricane Center advisory. Maximum staying wind still 125 miles an hour. Top end Category 3 hurricane. Movements now to the northwest at 13 miles an hour, up from that more westward motion before the weekend. Hurricane Center really hasn't had a lot of changes to this track or intensity forecast. Still expected to be a major hurricane for several more days, but also not really expected to strengthen all that much. Still holding that Category 3 intensity. Could briefly peak at Category 4. It's very, very close, just 5 miles an hour off Cat 4. So, I mean, it could become a Category 4 for a period of time. But it looks like Larry is pretty much in a holding pattern for a couple of reasons. One, Larry is a not a fully annular hurricane, but it's pretty close to an annular hurricane. This is what we talked about last video, where annular hurricanes develop in this part of the Atlantic basin because typically the conditions are a little offsetting, like the water's kind of warm but not super hot. The mid-level moisture is not great, but the wind shear is typically low, so you kind of have these offsetting factors, and what you get is these large hurricanes that become very stable, and they kind of stabilize, and the way they do this is to become annular. They get these big truck tire shaped eyes. You can see Larry definitely sports that sort of large eye, and you have this one thick ring of convection around that eye, but you don't have a lot of spiral bands. You still have some though with Larry, indicating it's not fully annular. There's a couple spiral bands out here and here, not a lot. You can see it's definitely much more uniform and tucked in, but still an impressive storm, especially given the fact that it's not in the greatest environment. The water vapor imagery shows an upper level low near Puerto Rico and Hispaniola, and that is pushing some southwest wind shear over Larry. Also a frontal boundary kind of within the region. So there's definitely some southwest, flow over the storm. You can see the trailing moisture away from the storm, and the fact that this side of the storm is very flat, where this side has got some banding to it. So definitely is not in the greatest environment. And also there's yellows indicating a lot of mid-level moisture around Larry. Even the upper levels, there's still some dry air definitely in the vicinity of the storm. So that's kind of offsetting it. And you can definitely see on infrared is kind of aggravating that western eye wall of the storm. And it's definitely like it keeps pulsing these blacks and reds, but or whites, but then they don't anchor, like that you see it come in and it falls apart, and it's going to do this. And that's what the dance has been doing for several days. The eye keeps contracting. Last chance, our last pass by our microwave image shows yet another eye wall replacement trying to take place. This little outer band kind of beginning to encroach on the inner eye wall. So probably yet another eye wall replacement cycle. Larry's probably going to be a huge storm as it moves through. It's not as big as I'd even thought it'd be, but it's still a pretty big hurricane. So that's kind of the rub for Bermuda, because if you look at how this probably plays out and track, so the hurricane models, very good agreement on the track, all east of Bermuda significantly. The Hurricane Center's official forecast is east of Bermuda as well on the best track line. But remember, this cone means the eye could pass anywhere within. The high pressure guiding Larry is still not set in stone. It could become a little stronger and push it more on the west side of this cone. And as if you Larry gets anywhere to the right, or to the left rather, of this line of the center of the cone, which some computer models do think could happen. The GFS and the Euro, again, all now uniformly east of Bermuda, which was not the case a couple days ago. They've all kind of shifted to an agreement that yes, the storm will pass east of Bermuda, and that's a lot higher confidence as it was than it was a few days ago. But again, if Larry is on this side of these cones, then some direct impacts are very likely. It's a very large storm. This is a Colorado State product where they kind of show you the actual wind field of the storm. And if you look down here in the bottom left, you have the radius of winds. So radius of 34 knot winds, which is tropical storm force. Those extend anywhere from 135 to 155 miles from the center of the storm. Your radius of 64 knot winds, which is your hurricane force winds, extend 40 to 75 miles in the eye. The 70s are mostly on the right side of the storm. So Bermuda cares more about, the southwest and side, so a little, it can get a little closer, but even that's a big radius of hurricane force winds. I mean, typically most hurricanes 15, 25 to like 40 miles is it, for your hurricane force winds. 75 miles of hurricane force winds is ridiculous, and that was the problem with Larry, is all these eyewall replacements. keep it from becoming a high-end like category 4 or 5 hurricane, but it really spreads that energy out with that central pressure down in the 950s. I mean, you get a big strong hurricane even though it's not intense at the center. It's just got this huge wind field, and if that comes anywhere near Bermuda, they are going to get direct impacts. And the point really being here, Larry doesn't have to get right on top of the island. It can still pass 50, 60, 70 miles off to the east, and still they would get a lot of impact. So definitely some rain coming, most likely some high swells for sure. The high swells will spread to the entire East Coast. Larry's when the swell waves will start to push towards the East Coast, and by midweek you'll have a lot of swells and rip currents along the East Coast. But again, Larry expected to pass well offshore, high confidence at this point, and no issue for us. We'll have to watch for Bermuda, and then late week, we'll have to watch for any passage to Newfoundland in Canada, as it appears that Nova Scotia is also going to be pretty safe. They could get some secondary impacts if it comes closer, but then Newfoundland's still under the gun for some potential strong winds and heavy rain and all that as the system gets caught up in a trough and becomes extra tropical. All right, guys, going over to Invest 91L, our other player this afternoon. Hurricane Center has the center of the storm or the wave or whatever you want to call it, the disturbance, just offshore of the Yucatan Peninsula or just emerging this evening. Matches up well with visible satellite imagery. You can see a weak area of mid-level low pressure, or mid-level lower heights kind of churning out here. Your surface trough still in place, kind of something like this. Definitely nothing too impressive. Some strong upper level winds belting the system and outflow boundaries in this thunderstorm, still indicating dry air. So this is definitely not an impressive, like, oh wow, this thing is just minutes away from a tropical depression. This is a mess. But it's been a very persistent mess. It's been a persistent mess since the middle of last week. So storms like this or systems like this, we have to keep watching, because messes that persist can then eventually, if they find better environments, can develop into tropical depressions and tropical storms. You don't want to completely discount it. But again, this isn't something like Ida where we were like, oh man, this is going off in any minute. And the future of the storm looks like this. The environment it's going into, not very favorable. The upper level winds are the big problem, so we'll start with that. The 200 millibar flow shows that belt of strong winds we showed you on satellite, on staying around through tomorrow's upper level low kind of over the region, blasting the storm. Now the wave is going to weakly move along surface high pressure, and it's going to kind of recurve out into the central and eastern Gulf. But as we go through Tuesday and Wednesday, the upper level winds stay very strong. This upper low here, I mean, these winds are still pretty strong, and these are definitely going to limit the ability. Now, late week, you have a trough dipping down with an associated cold front, and that's what's going to eventually pick this up and pull it over Florida and out to sea. And these winds are not going to allow any significant, not going to allow a hurricane, not even going to allow a strong tropical storm. There's not going to be a lot of opportunity for 91L, but it doesn't mean that something couldn't still spin up. Both the GFS and the European model do spin up weak low pressure near Florida by the end of the week. GFS 850 millibar vorticity does show us by Wednesday into Thursday, you've kind of got this little low forming here around the Big Bend, and even in the last frame there, Friday or late Thursday, it's got a weak area low pressure moving in just north of Tampa, and then moves it across the state on Friday. Now this is because this will be kind of caught up in a cold front pushing in, so you'll have this little low out ahead of the cold front. Very common. That does help force them. European kind of shows the same thing. Nothing through Tuesday, nothing through Wednesday, nothing really through Thursday, but then by Friday, Friday morning again, you've got this weak low. Now this is a little bit further north than where the GFS has it, closer to Tampa, but generally that Big Bend, and then that weak low moves over Florida into Saturday, and then Sunday and beyond. Kind of has a weak low pressure developing. Not much of one, but a weak tropical storm perhaps would kind of be the upper echelon for this. The bigger factor will be the rainfall. Mid-level moisture from the GFS shows, again, that broad cyclonic rotation, and you can see the cold front showing up pretty well by Thursday morning on this model. The definite divider are these upper-level winds out of the north moving in, and much drier air mass coming in, and then the tropical moisture all out ahead of that dry air mass. So this front's pushing in this way, and all this dry air and cooler air is pushing in this way. But again, up front of that, you have the chance for a little bit of cyclogenesis and a little bit of development, and it will be wrapped up in a bunch of tropical moisture surging up through Florida and through the eastern U.S., Carolinas, southeast Georgia, etc. And then this all kind of pushes off by the weekend as Sunday or Saturday into Sunday. The front kind of extends down into Florida, and whatever develops is kicked offshore. So we're not really expecting any kind of big, massive hurricane or anything like that, but We could have some kind of named storm trying to spin up late this week somewhere in the eastern Gulf of Mexico, Panhandle of Florida, western Florida, and even northern Florida. All would have to kind of watch this for some gusty winds, some heavy rainfall. Definitely, when you have tropical moisture mixing with a strong cold front, you definitely have the potential for that. Some thunderstorms. Could all be on the table, and whether it's named or not will depend on what kind of tropical characteristics it has. Maybe limited for whatever it has, but whether it's named or not, a lot of rain and whatnot coming. But again, no major threats right now as far as 91L is concerned, unless the upper level wind environment changes significantly in that short period of time. Don't think this is going to be too impressive, but something could be spinning up by the end of the week. So that's the latest on 91L. Something to watch, but definitely not running for the hills. And then looking at NOAA's 2-week hazard map going into this coming week, they do show the high potential for yet another wave or two coming off Africa to develop, and then they're also showing a potential for some western Gulf of Mexico development. This is separate from the wave we were talking about. I think that by the end of this forecast period, towards September 14th, which is like going into the week after, so this coming week, we're recording this on Sunday. So the coming week, we watched Larry turn by Bermuda, we watch him turn by Canada, and then we also watch our little Gulf low by Thursday, Friday. These things happen about the same time. Larry gets up Wednesday, Thursday, Friday by Bermuda and such. Our little Gulf messer around thing kind of Thursday, Friday. But then that weekend, then the next week is when we're looking at potential for something in the western Gulf of Mexico trying to spin up, and then more players off Africa. Your large scale upper air pattern is going to change. So this big front dips in the eastern U.S. late this week, but then by the middle of next week, so again September 14th, 15th, 16th, strong high pressure over the central Atlantic. Troughs are more cut up by Canada than Northeast. You've got weaker flow over the Gulf, and the models have been consistently hinting at some sort of tropical waves moving up into this region and developing somewhere in the Western Gulf. It's way too early for anything. You're going to see some bad pages go, oh, big hurricane coming for Texas, because the GFS, I mean, I'll show it to you because why not? The GFS does develop. You see here this kind of deep tropical flow surges up through Central America. Kind of the same thing 91L did, but the upper level environment's a lot better this next go around to the middle of the month. And then the GFS spins up a hurricane and kind of has it wandering off the coast of Texas and Louisiana. That was a 12Z run. I'm not sure if the 18Z is out yet. Okay, so the 18Z doesn't really show it yet, but generally the same idea here as some low pressure developing in the western Gulf and the Bay of Campeche going into the middle of the week or middle of the month. So something to watch for the western Gulf. It's way too far out. Any pages you see showing you a death hurricane with this screenshot, they're just full of crap and they're trying to scare you. There's no immediate threat, but it is a general pattern the models have been hinting at for a while. It's worth watching. And then we also have these waves coming off of Africa right now. More will come off, and the waves that come off uh, for this part of the forecast period, towards the end of the forecast period, are less likely to turn to seed, like Jolene or whatever the J storm was that Julian, I think, that came and went 12 hours. Kate and Larry all took out to sea. That gate's going to close off. It looks like whatever comes off Africa is going to go back to riding more to the south, and waves that ride far enough south, they get into the Caribbean, they get into this region, do have a chance to develop, and especially in the middle of the month, we'll have to watch that carefully. So after Larry and 91L, no immediate threats on the horizon, but the Western Gulf is going to be something to watch, and then those waves coming off of Africa will also be something to watch. I think the activity definitely picks back up the second half of this month into early October, so more storms are coming. We're passing the peak of the hurricane. The climatological peak of the season is September 10th. So there is still, climatologically speaking, more than half the season to go, despite a lot of activity we've seen so far. So just be ready. We're going to keep tracking it all for you. We'll have it here and then on the Facebook page, Redbeard's Weather page. So go check it out for any little updates between the videos. And until then, guys, thanks for watching. Have a good one.